The twilight air, scented with expensive catering and the cloying sweetness of imported lilies, hung heavy over the sprawling grounds of our estate. It was the kind of evening that whispered of old money and effortless perfection, the kind of event we were famous for hosting. Today was our 15th anniversary, 15 years of what the world saw as a golden marriage, a partnership that others envied and sought to emulate. The setting sun, bleeding across the Connecticut sky, cast long, elegant shadows over the manicured lawns, making the crystal champagne flutes on the white cloth tables sparkle like captured starlight. Vincent, my husband, had insisted on this extravagance. A string quartet, tucked discreetly beneath the weeping willow, played a soft Vivaldi that drifted across the lawn, a soundtrack to a life I no longer recognized. I stood on the veranda, a glass of untouched champagne warming in my hand, watching the spectacle unfold. We had 50 guests, the elite of our social circle, business magnates, old family friends and relatives. They saw Isabel, the graceful hostess in a designer gown, the devoted wife of the brilliant Vincent. They saw the picture of enduring love and success. But the reality, the truth I had been choking on for 3 agonizing weeks, was that this entire scene was a grotesque masquerade. It was a meticulously constructed stage, and I was the lead actress in a play that was about to take a very dark turn. Every smile I offered felt like a shard of glass in my throat, every polite murmur of agreement. Every time I accepted congratulations on our milestone, I felt a deeper betrayal of the woman I used to be, the woman who had believed in the vows we exchanged. The space in my chest, where my heart used to beat with naive affection, was now a frozen void, occupied only by a cold, calculating resolve. Vincent moved through the crowd with the predatory grace that had served him so well in the boardroom. He was handsome, undeniably so, with that silver at the temples look that inspired trust and admiration. He radiated charm, a magnetic force that pulled everyone into his orbit. I watched him clap his business partner, Jason, on the back, the sound of their hearty, false laughter grating on my nerves. He charmed my mother with anecdotes, and then, inevitably, he made his way back to me. He always needed to ensure his prized possession was properly displayed. His arm snaked around my waist, a heavy, possessive weight. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured. His breath, smelling of aged scotch and arrogance, brushed against my ear. He tilted my chin up, his eyes scanning the crowd before he kissed me. It was a kiss for the audience, long enough to suggest passion, but utterly devoid of warmth. It was a performer's kiss, a transaction, a claim of ownership. In the past, that gesture made me feel secure, cherished. Now it felt like a brand being pressed into my skin. I didn't flinch. I had spent the last 3 weeks training myself not to react, not to let the mask slip. I gave him the soft, adoring look that was expected of Vincent's wife, the look I had perfected over a decade and a half of subjugation. "Happy anniversary, darling," I replied, my voice as smooth and unwrinkled as the silk of my sapphire dress. He squeezed my waist, a subtle reminder of who was in control. "Everything is absolutely perfect, isn't it, Isabel? Exactly as I planned." His gaze swept over the party, a king surveying his kingdom. "Perfect," I agreed, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. My eyes flickered, just for a moment, to the large projector screen set up near the edge of the patio. Currently, it displayed a gentle, looping slideshow of photos from our 15 years together, our wedding day, holidays in Aspen, charity galas. A visual testament to a life that was, in reality, a monumental sham. Vincent saw that screen as a monument to his success, to the perfect life he had curated. I saw it as the instrument of his impending downfall. The anticipation of what was to come thrummed beneath my skin, a dangerous electric current. The Vivaldi swelled, the guests laughed, and I smiled, waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. The irony was almost too much to bear. He had orchestrated this evening to be his grand farewell, a final performance of the devoted husband before he disappeared. He intended it to be my ultimate humiliation. He had no idea that I had rewritten the script. Tonight, the performance would be mine, and the humiliation would be entirely his. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles bursting coldly in my mouth. It was time.
The unraveling of my life had been obscenely cliché, the kind of plot twist you'd find in a cheap novella. It happened 3 weeks ago, on a humid Tuesday night that was indistinguishable from 1,000 other quiet evenings in our sterile, beautiful home. The air conditioning hummed, the house was silent, and I was organizing the bookshelf in our study, a mundane task for a mundane life. Vincent was in the shower, the drumming of the water against the marble tiles a familiar, monotonous rhythm. He was usually surgically attached to his phone, guarding it with a vigilance that I, in my blissful ignorance, had attributed to the pressures of his work. He was an important man, after all. But that night, he had left it on the mahogany nightstand, face down, a silent black rectangle. I had never been the suspicious type. I was raised to believe that trust was the sacred foundation of a marriage. I had prided myself on not being that kind of wife, the insecure, prying shrew. But the past few months had planted seeds of doubt that had begun to take root in the darkest corners of my mind. It wasn't one single event, but an accumulation of small, insidious changes. The late nights at the office that stretched into the early morning hours, the sudden, obsessive new workout regimen, the faint, unfamiliar scent of gardenias and spice clinging to his suit jackets, and the distance, the emotional chasm that had opened between us, wide and cold and silent. I had explained it all away. Midlife crisis, work stress, the natural cooling of a long marriage. I was a fool. His phone buzzed. Once. Twice. A vibration against the wood. A strange, cold premonition, sharp and sudden, pierced through my denial. It was an instinctual pull, a sense of dread that compelled me to walk across the room, my footsteps silenced by the plush Persian rug. I picked up the phone, the screen illuminated automatically, and the world tilted on its axis. The message was from a contact labeled simply Sabrina, adorned with a lipstick emoji. The preview text was a bullet to the heart. Can't wait for you to be free of the ball and chain. Is the new account finalized? Turks and Caicos awaits, lover. My breath stopped. The silence of the room seemed to scream at me. The ball and chain? My hands, suddenly trembling uncontrollably, felt disconnected from my body. I unlocked the phone. His password, in a twist of cruel irony, was our anniversary date, the day he promised to forsake all others. I opened the messaging app, and the depth of his betrayal opened up beneath me like a hellmouth. It wasn't a recent mistake, a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a parallel universe he had been living in for over 2 years. Hundreds, thousands of messages. Photos that seared themselves into my memory. Vincent, tanned and laughing, his arm around a younger, raven-haired woman on a white sand beach. Them kissing on a balcony overlooking the azure waters of Santorini, a trip he told me was a grueling mergers and acquisitions conference in Chicago. But it was the words that truly flayed me alive, the casual cruelty, the mockery. They dissected me, my boring charity work, my predictable habits, my frigid demeanor. He called me the Ice Queen, the porcelain doll. He complained about my complete, pathetic ignorance of his real life. And then I found the financial records. It wasn't just emotional infidelity, it was calculated destruction. They had been systematically draining our joint savings, funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into an offshore account in her name, Sabrina Moreau. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to leave me destitute. He was going to wipe out 15 years of my life and disappear. I stood there, in the perfectly decorated bedroom, the sound of the shower a mocking applause. The grief was a physical blow, so immense I thought it would shatter my bones. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. I wanted to scream, to smash the expensive mirrors, to tear the silk sheets from the bed. I wanted to collapse. But as the initial wave of agony crested, something else began to rise from the wreckage. The sorrow, the heartbreak, the humiliation. It all began to curdle under the weight of his betrayal, hardening into something cold, sharp, and unbreakable. It was a fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was quiet. It was focused. The woman who had spent 15 years being the perfect, compliant wife died in that moment. In her place, something else was born. He intended to erase me. I decided, right then, as he rinsed the scent of her off his skin in my shower, that I would be the one to erase him. The 3 weeks leading up to the anniversary party were a blur of calculated deception and clandestine warfare. I was living a double life, characterized by a terrifying clarity of purpose. By day, I was the quintessential hostess, the dutiful wife, Isabel. I discussed seating arrangements with Vincent, debated the merits of Chilean sea bass versus filet mignon with the caterers, and approved floral arrangements, all with a serene smile plastered on my face. I played the part he had written for me, lulling him into a false sense of security. He saw my cooperation as compliance, my silence as ignorance. He was so convinced of his own superiority, of my weakness, that he never once suspected the venomous rage brewing beneath my placid exterior. But when night fell, and Vincent slipped into a deep, untroubled sleep, the sleep of a man who believes he has already won, the real work began. The woman who used to spend her evenings reading historical fiction or planning charity luncheons was gone. In her place was a specter, haunting the dimly lit study, fueled by adrenaline and a cold, righteous anger. My first strategic move had been a phone call to Sharon Vance. Sharon was not just a divorce attorney, she was a weapon. Known in the city's legal circles as the Barracuda, she specialized in high-conflict, high-net-worth divorces, and she was famous for her merciless dismantling of entitled men. I met her in her sterile, high-rise office, laying out the preliminary evidence with a calmness that surprised even me. Sharon listened, her expression impassive, her eyes sharp and analytical. "He is planning to liquidate and run," she stated, not a question, but a fact. "You cannot confront him, Isabel. Not yet. If he suspects you know, he will accelerate his timeline, hide the remaining assets, and you will be left fighting for scraps." Her advice was clinical and precise. We need to document everything, every transaction, every communication. Let him walk into the trap he set for himself. Let him believe he is in complete control until the moment we spring the lock. And so my nocturnal education began. I became a forensic accountant, a digital spy. Night after night, I sat at his desk, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. I used specialized software to recover deleted files from his laptop, mirroring his hard drive. I unearthed the graveyard of his deceit. I downloaded years of text messages and emails between him and Sabrina Moreau. The sheer volume of their correspondence was staggering. They documented their affair with the arrogance of people who believed they were untouchable. I cataloged the photos of their clandestine trips, the yacht in Turks and Caicos, the hotel suite in Santorini, the weekend escapades in Miami. I cross-referenced these with his supposed business trips, creating a damning timeline of his lies. The financial betrayal was even more complex, but I dissected it with a patience I didn't know I possessed. I accessed our joint accounts, taking meticulous screenshots of the wire transfers. I traced the exorbitant credit card bills for $20,000 for a platinum and diamond bracelet I had never seen, first-class plane tickets to exotic locations, stays at five-star resorts. He was spending my future on her. I compiled it all into a single, devastating presentation. It was my magnum opus, a symphony of his destruction. The final slide was the coup de grace, a screenshot of a recent email he'd sent to Sabrina, so confident that he hadn't even bothered to delete it. Just one last performance at the anniversary party, and then I'm all yours, my love. We'll be sipping rum in the Dominican Republic before the Ice Queen even knows what hit her. I saved the presentation onto a small, sleek silver USB drive. It felt heavy with the weight of his sins. I bought a silver chain and wore the drive around my neck, hidden beneath my clothing. It rested against my sternum, a cold, metallic promise. There were moments, usually in the gray light of dawn, when the grief threatened to overwhelm me. The ghost of the man I thought I loved would appear in my memory. The way he smiled when we first met, the way he held my hand during a difficult time years ago. But then I would touch the USB drive, remember the phrase Ice Queen, and the ice would reform in my veins colder and harder than before. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about justice. It was about survival.
The party was in full swing, a glittering success by any measure. The garden buzzed with the low hum of influential conversation and polite laughter. The string quartet had transitioned to a livelier Mozart, the music weaving through the crowd, a beautiful soundtrack that felt increasingly discordant with the tempest raging inside my chest. I moved through the gathering, a vision in sapphire blue, my smile painted on with expert precision, my demeanor the very picture of graceful composure. But beneath the facade, I was a tightly coiled spring, counting the minutes. I saw Vincent's parents, William and Elizabeth, holding court near the imported marble fountain. They were pillars of the community, radiating an old-world dignity. They had always treated me with genuine affection, often saying I was the daughter they never had. Elizabeth caught my eye and waved, her face alight with pride. My stomach clenched. They were good people, blinded by love for their son. The pain they were about to endure was a necessary casualty of Vincent's war. But it was the only part of my plan that caused a genuine pang of regret. I smiled back, a brittle, bright thing, and moved on. My best friend Emily intercepted me near the rose bushes. She hugged me fiercely, smelling of Chanel and champagne. 15 years, Izzy, I can't believe it, she gushed, her eyes shining with genuine happiness for me. You and Vincent, you really are the ultimate couple goals. You give the rest of us hope. The guilt of my deception towards her was a sharp, sudden sting. Emily deserved the truth, but she couldn't know it yet. The impact required a public stage. Thank you, Em, I managed, squeezing her hand. It means the world that you're here. Meanwhile, Vincent was in his element. He thrived in this environment, the magnetic center of every conversation, the benevolent host, the successful man. He was performing the role of devoted husband with Oscar-worthy conviction. He refilled his father's glass with an attentive hand. He shared a robust, booming laugh with my brother, James, and constantly, performatively, he sought me out. He would appear at my side, pulling me into his orbit, a kiss on the cheek, a hand resting possessively on the small of my back. It was a territorial display masked as affection. "Isn't she radiant?" he announced to a group of his colleagues clustered around the outdoor bar. They were younger men, sycophants who hung on his every word. 15 years, gentlemen, and she's more stunning than the day I met her. I am the luckiest man alive." The men murmured their agreement, their eyes skimming over me with polite appreciation. I felt like a prized thoroughbred being shown at auction. The casual objectification, the blatant hypocrisy of his words sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. But I held his gaze and smiled, the perfect, adoring wife. I caught my reflection in the large glass doors leading to the patio. The woman staring back at me was beautiful, poised, serene. She looked like a woman who had everything. But her eyes were different. They held a chilling focus, the terrifying calm of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The sun dipped lower, the shadows grew longer, the time for the toast was approaching. The show was about to begin, and I was ready for my cue. I had spent 15 years being a supporting character in his life. Tonight, I was taking center stage.
The sun finally vanished below the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic, bruised strokes of purple, orange, and blood red. It felt fittingly apocalyptic. The caterers moved silently through the crowd, lighting the tiki torches that lined the garden path and the perimeter of the patio. The flickering flames cast a warm, intimate light on the faces of our guests, creating an atmosphere of celebration and closeness that felt increasingly surreal. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the underlying tension that only I could taste. Vincent, flushed with expensive champagne and the intoxicating nectar of adoration, seemed to be floating on air. He was triumphant, a man surveying the final, successful chapter of a long con. It was then, amidst the laughter and the music, that the first real crack in my composure threatened to show. He was standing with Jason, his business partner, and a few other key investors near the bar. They were laughing, a loud, braying sound that signaled they were already several drinks deep. Vincent's phone vibrated in the pocket of his tailored suit jacket. I watched him pull it out, his movements fluid and casual, a man without a care in the world. I was standing just a few feet away, accepting a refill of sparkling water, close enough to see the screen light up. The notification was bright and damning. From Sabrina. "Thinking of you on your last anniversary, Winky. Can't wait to celebrate properly." His thumb moved with lightning speed to dismiss the notification, a reflex action honed by 2 years of deceit. But he wasn't fast enough. Not this time. He glanced up, perhaps feeling the weight of my gaze, and his eyes met mine. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic in his expression, a flash of the cornered animal. Before it was instantly shuttered, replaced by his usual charming, impenetrable smile. He thought I hadn't seen it, or perhaps he believed that even if I had, the simple Isabel wouldn't understand the significance. He underestimated me. It was his fatal flaw. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned back to Jason, clapping him on the shoulder with a conspiratorial wink. He lowered his voice, but in a sudden lull in the music, his words carried, clear and sharp, directly to me. "Marriage, especially a long one, is all about management. You have to know how to keep the peace. With Isabel, it's simple.
As long as she has the platinum card, her charity committees, and this garden to fuss over, she's perfectly content. She's a simple creature, really. Beautiful, but simple. Jason chuckled uncomfortably, his eyes darting nervously in my direction before he took a large gulp of his drink. The other men laughed, a low, knowing rumble of masculine agreement. The casual cruelty of it, the utter dismissal of my intelligence, my emotions, my very humanity, was more devastating than the affair itself. In that moment, he wasn't just a cheater. He was a monster. The insult, delivered so publicly, so arrogantly, cauterized any lingering sentimentality I might have harbored. Any whisper of doubt about what I was about to do was instantly extinguished. The man I had married, the man I had loved and supported for 15 years, was well and truly gone, if he had ever existed at all. The person standing before me, basking in the torchlight, was a stranger, a villain in a bespoke suit. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, the ice clinking against the glass. The sound was loud in the sudden quiet of my mind, like a timer counting down the final seconds of his reign. The orchestra was tuning up for the grand finale, and Vincent, in his infinite arrogance, was about to take center stage. A little after 9 o'clock, the moment arrived. The air was cool, the stars were beginning to pierce the indigo velvet of the sky, and the party had reached that golden, mellow stage where everyone was relaxed, defenses lowered. Vincent, ever the showman, walked to the center of the patio. He took a spoon and tapped it gently against his crystal champagne flute. The clear, high-pitched ring cut through the ambient hum of conversation and music. It was a sound that commanded attention. The string quartet faded into silence. A hush fell over the 50 guests as they turned toward him, their faces expectant, smiling, ready to celebrate the man they admired and the marriage they envied. He stood directly in front of the large projector screen. The looping slideshow had frozen on our official wedding portrait from 15 years ago. Two young, hopeful, desperately naive people, smiling into a future that turned out to be a mirage. Vincent beamed, radiating confidence and control. He looked magnificent in the flickering torchlight, the very picture of a successful, devoted husband. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice rich, resonant, and perfectly modulated. "It means the world to Isabel and me to have you here, our dearest friends and family." He paused, surveying the crowd. 15 years. It's a long time. A lifetime for some. He turned his gaze toward me, and I felt the weight of it, heavy and suffocating. I held his gaze, my expression perfectly neutral, a placid mask hiding the roaring inferno within. I could feel every eye in the garden on us, the golden couple. "Over these 15 years," he continued, his voice taking on a reflective tone, "I learned a lot. I've built a business, I've cultivated friendships, and I've learned a great deal about myself. But my greatest lessons," he said, his voice dropping slightly, forcing the audience to lean in, "have come from my wife, Isabel." A collective murmur of appreciation swept through the crowd. I saw Emily wipe a tear from her eye. I saw his mother, Elizabeth, beam with pride. They were anticipating a heartfelt tribute, a declaration of love. They were expecting his usual script. He raised his glass higher, the crystal catching the light. "So I'd like to propose a toast." He took a deep, dramatic breath, savoring the moment. He was building the suspense, enjoying the power he held over the room. And then he delivered the line. "To my wife, who taught me exactly what I don't want in a partner." The words hung in the air, thick, toxic, and unbelievable. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where all sound had been extinguished. A collective sharp intake of breath rippled through the crowd. It was a sound that commanded attention. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Vincent's father, William, stared at his son, slack-jawed, his face draining of color. The guests looked between Vincent and me, confusion and disbelief etched on their faces. Vincent's expression was one of pure, unadulterated smugness. He had planned this. He wanted to humiliate me publicly, to cast me as the inadequate, burdensome wife he was finally shedding. He wanted to control the narrative of our separation. He expected me to crumble. He expected tears, shame, a hasty retreat into the house. He expected to break me in front of everyone we knew. But I didn't crumble. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Instead, a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It was not the polite, practiced smile of the hostess. It was the smile of a chess master who had just watched their opponent make the fatal move, walking directly into an inescapable checkmate. The guests gasped again, this time in confusion at my reaction. I gave a small, deliberate nod, as if accepting his cruel toast. "Thank you, Vincent. You've just given me the perfect introduction." I set my glass down on a nearby table with a deliberate click. Then I reached up, pulled the silver USB drive from underneath the neckline of my dress, and walked calmly, purposefully, towards the laptop connected to the big screen. The final act had begun. Every eye in the garden followed me. The silence was heavy, suffocating, thick with the toxic mixture of shock and morbid anticipation. The only sound was the click of my heels on the flagstone patio. I could feel Vincent's gaze burning into my back. His smugness had evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror. He realized he had lost control of the narrative, but he didn't yet understand the extent of the disaster. I reached the small table holding the laptop that controlled the projector. My hands were perfectly steady, my movements deliberate and precise. I felt an almost surreal sense of detachment, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. With a swift movement, I unplugged the small device running the sentimental photo slideshow and inserted my own silver USB drive. I clicked open the single file, labeled "The Truth." The image of our wedding portrait on the giant screen vanished, instantly replaced by the first slide of my presentation. It was stark white with bold black, unmistakable letters. What Vincent really wants in a partner. A nervous, confused murmur swept through the crowd. Vincent took a step forward, his face hardening. "Isabel, what the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice a low growl, trying to maintain some semblance of authority. "Turn that off. You're embarrassing yourself." I ignored him, turning slightly to face the audience, remote control in hand. Vincent mentioned he learned what he doesn't want. I thought it only fair to share what he does want. Her name is Sabrina Moreau. I clicked to the next slide. The screen was filled with screenshots of his text conversations with Sabrina. I had chosen the most damning exchanges. The giant screen magnified their cruelty, displaying it in horrific clarity for our closest friends and family. Vincent, counting down the days until I'm free of the Ice Queen. She's as cold as a crypt. Sabrina, her biggest ambition is winning the prize for Best Rosebush at the Garden Club. So pathetic. You deserve a real woman. Vincent, a string of laughing emojis. Soon, baby, soon. The gasps from the crowd were no longer of confusion, but of audible disgust and horror. I saw my brother James step forward, his face thunderous. But I held up a hand slightly, stopping him. This was my fight. I advanced the slide. A collage of photos appeared.
Vincent and Sabrina on a sun-drenched yacht in Turks and Caicos, his hand resting possessively on her bare waist, his face beaming with a genuine happiness I hadn't seen in years. Them clinking champagne glasses on a balcony in Santorini, the famous blue domes visible behind them, the very trips he had told me were grueling, lonely work obligations. His mother, Elizabeth, let out a choked, agonizing sob, collapsing against her husband. William looked as though he had been physically struck, his face ashen. "He's not just emotionally bankrupt," I announced, my voice ringing with the cold, clear authority. "He's also a thief." I clicked to the next slide. The financial breakdown. I had used simple charts and highlighted figures, courtesy of Sharon's forensic accountant, to make the betrayal undeniable even to the most financially illiterate person in the crowd. The large systematic withdrawals from our joint savings, the money I had inherited from my grandmother, the money we had saved for our future. The corresponding deposits into an offshore account under the name Sabrina Moreau. The next slide. A list of credit card charges. The $20,000 Cartier bracelet. First-class plane tickets. The 5-star hotel suites. The evidence of his meticulous, calculated plan to leave me with nothing was laid bare for everyone he respected. Everyone whose opinion he valued to see. Vincent was frozen, a statue of disbelief. His face was a ghastly shade of pale under the patio lights. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His world, his reputation, his carefully constructed life was collapsing in high-definition glory in front of him. I clicked to the final slide. The email. "Just one last performance at the anniversary party, and then I'm all yours. We'll be sipping rum in the Dominican Republic before the Ice Queen even knows what hit her." I turned from the screen, the damning words glowing behind me, and faced my husband. The silence in the garden was absolute, deafening. The party didn't end with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet, horrified implosion. The fallout was immediate and absolute. There were no shouted accusations from the guests, no angry confrontations. The betrayal was too vast, the humiliation too complete. There was only the quiet, palpable shame. Our guests averted their eyes, unable to look at Vincent and too ashamed to look at me. They muttered hasty, whispered goodbyes, fleeing the scene of the execution as quickly as they could. Jason, Vincent's business partner, simply shook his head in disgust and walked away without a word. My friend Emily, tears streaming down her face, gave me a quick, fierce hug before disappearing into the night. Vincent's parents were the last to leave. His father, William, a man whose pride and integrity I had always admired, couldn't even look at me. His face was a mask of stony disappointment. He simply put a trembling hand on his wife's shoulder and guided her away from the wreckage. Elizabeth, however, paused. Her face was ravaged by sorrow, the tears flowing freely. "Isabel, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice broken. She looked at her son, a look of such profound grief and betrayal that it was almost hard to watch, before turning to follow her husband. They left Vincent standing alone, abandoned by everyone who mattered to him. The caterers packed up in near silence, their professional veneer barely concealing their shock. They had witnessed the social destruction of a prominent man. Soon, the garden was empty, littered with abandoned champagne glasses, the string quartet's instruments packed away, the silence broken only by the sound of the fountain. It was just the two of us, standing amidst the ruins of a marriage and the ghosts of a life that never really existed. Vincent finally moved. He was trembling, not with remorse, but with a rage born of utter humiliation. He looked at me, and I saw a hatred so pure it was almost breathtaking.
You! He shrieked, his voice cracking, the sophisticated facade gone, leaving only the spoiled, cornered narcissist beneath. You insane, vindictive bitch! You ruined me! You ruined everything! He lunged toward me, his face contorted in a mask of impotent fury, his hands clenched into fists. He stopped short, just inches from me, as if hitting an invisible wall. Perhaps it was the look in my eyes. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He had no power over me. "No, Vincent," I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of emotion. "You ruined everything. I just turned on the lights. I showed everyone the cockroach you really are." He stared at me, his chest heaving, the realization of the totality of his defeat beginning to sink in. His reputation was gone. His family was gone. His friends were gone. "What now?" he spat, the question full of venom, yet laced with a desperate fear. "Do you expect me to beg, to crawl, to apologize for wanting more than the sterile life you were content with?" I gave a small, humorless laugh. It felt strange, a sound I hadn't made in weeks. "I don't expect anything from you anymore, Vincent. I finally see you for what you are. Nothing." I took a deep breath, delivering the final blow. "The locks will be changed in the morning. Your belongings will be packed and put in storage. And my lawyer, Sharon Vance, will be serving you with divorce papers at your office on Monday morning. She has a full copy of that presentation, by the way." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "As does the forensic accountant who is currently helping the IRS look into your undeclared offshore accounts in the Dominican Republic." The last vestiges of color drained completely from his face. The rage was replaced with terror. It wasn't just the divorce. It was the legal and financial annihilation that awaited him. I looked at this broken man, this hollow shell of arrogance and deceit, and I felt not hatred, not triumph, not even pity, just the vast, empty, liberating peace. I turned my back on him and on the beautiful house that had been my prison for 15 years. I walked through the empty rooms, out the front door, and didn't look back. The night air was cool and clean against my skin. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I could finally breathe.